Welcome everyone to today's Fuel for Thought. I am so excited to have our guests today, Dr. Maddie Barron and Dr. Keaton Muzika. These are our amazing sports psychologists that we have here at Northwestern University. They have a couple of other colleagues, but they were so generous with their time that they are answered the call today to help us tackle our most challenging food and body questions. So I do have some questions that we've been collecting throughout the quarter, and I am going to kind of pose these questions to Maddie and Keaton, and we're going to have a really great conversation around those today. Everyone on this call is welcome to pop in if you have some questions yourself, or if you have any follow-up questions. This can certainly be interactive. If you'd rather just put your questions or your comments in the chat box, I can be monitoring the chat box as well. This will be our last Fuel for Thought of the quarter. So in case I don't say it again, we hope that everybody has a really happy, healthy, and restful holidays. And with that, I'm going to get started with Keaton and Maddie. Do you both want to just take a second to introduce yourselves, and then we can get rolling with the questions?
That sounds great, Katie. Thanks so much for having us. We are very excited to be here and kind of sharing this space with you, and have loved your past presentations and guest speakers. So we're just glad to be part of this. So I'm Keaton Muzika. I'm a psychologist at CAPS. I'm on the sports psych team. And I'm happy to be here. I guess I'll keep it short and sweet.
I agree with Keaton. Katie, we're so excited to be here. We truly love, working with our colleagues in sports medicine and performance nutrition, and what a great topic, to tackle today. I'm Maddie Barron. I'm a clinical sports psychologist on the sports psych team as well with Keaton, and, thanks for having us.
Fabulous. Okay, let's start getting into some of these really great questions. So the first question that we've gotten is, I know that I struggle with comparison, especially between me and my teammates, and even between me and other people that I see on social media. And so, what are your recommendations for that? Another secondary question that we've received that's very similar to this is, I eat a very similar thing as my teammates, but I put on weight and they don't. Or I work out very similarly to them, but they lose weight and I don't. So could you help us kind of tackle this comparison conversation first?
Definitely. Whoever asked this question, thank you. It's a wonderful question. One that I think is multi-layered, and so we'll attack as much of this question, I think, as we can. So let's see. You guys can see my slides, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. So I think the first thing that we want to mention is we're human, right? So as humans, we make social comparisons. We compare ourselves to others. Some of us all the time, some of us sometimes, and it happens. And I think none of us are immune to that. So that's one piece, and that it's okay. I think a big, problem or concern with making these social comparisons is we have very different bodies. We have very different genetic makeup, very different fueling needs. So it's truly, when we're comparing ourselves to the person sitting next to us, or to our teammate, or kind of even worse, or sometimes more destructive, what we're seeing on social media or in the movies, it's comparing apples to oranges, or like apples to cucumber. Like, it's not even two round fruits. Like, it's apples to something that might not even be something that's edible. And so we're all very different. What we're fueling for is optimal performance. And Katie, I know you and those in performance nutrition really make that point very frequently. So if we're thinking about what does my body need, it's going to be very different than what your teammate's body needs, and certainly than what the person on social media's body needs. So I think the first step in helping manage some of these social comparisons is reminding ourselves of this. What I need is very different than what you need, than what my teammate needs, than what somebody in another sport needs. And so if we can remember this, it's hard to remember, but if we can remember that, that can sort of help negate some of the impact, the negative impact that some of these comparisons have. I think social media comparisons And I do this, you're scrolling through social media and you see somebody's life that seems just fantastic, or you see somebody posed in a bikini or like flexing their muscles and you're like, geez, like I don't have that. I think we need to remember some things that we all know but forget. As one, what we see on social media is like a millisecond of somebody's life, and it's not a whole picture. And two, like Photoshop, 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 right? So like this is, we're comparing ourselves to something that's not, it's not real. So it's airbrushed, and I could paint abs onto my stomach, no problem, and that might look okay, but the reality is they're not there. So I think like remembering that is really, really important too. When we're making these comparisons, I think it's fueled by this idea that there's an ideal body, or wanting the perfect or ideal body. And I think the irony or challenges is that for both men and women, it's a social construct. It's a trend what the ideal body is, and also it doesn't usually connect with at all like what's healthy, or what we need for performance, or what we need just to maintain kind of, yeah, like our health over time, both physical and emotional health. So I do want to share a video that I real quick. Let's see here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. It's a 3-minute video that I really love, that I think kind of takes us through the ideal body or body image over time. This one is for women. I couldn't find one kind of side by side, men and women, but this is true for men too. And the ideal body over time and over the decades has truly changed. So bear with me for a second as I pull this up. All right. Okay.
What people
Can you hear it
consider
okay?
to be the ideal woman has changed drastically.
Oh, I think you muted yourself.
Always striving for the perfect body, no matter the consequence. The perfect body type throughout history. Full-figured. Compared to what we think of now in regards to body image, it's crazy to imagine that during the Renaissance, women who were full-figured and overweight were considered to be the most attractive. From the 1400s to the 16th century, being thin was a symbol of being poor because you couldn't afford to buy food. If you look at paintings from that time period, you'll see the ideal woman of that time was much different than today's standards. Tiny waists. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, the women of the Victorian era were focused on having a small waist. They went to extreme measures to look tiny, wearing corsets that would make it difficult for them to breathe or sit down. Some women even experienced health issues and broken ribs while trying to transform themselves into the ideal woman, which meant having a 12-inch waist. The androgynous look. In the 1920s, women did not want to show off their curves like they do today. The flapper dresses they wore during that time helped hide their shape and give their chests a flat look, something women strive to have. Some even wrapped cloth around their breasts in order to create a more androgynous appearance. This boyish expression was considered to be the ultimate body type in the 1920s. The influence of Hollywood. In the years between the 1930s and 1950s, women wanted to look like movie stars. Unlike the 1920s, they now wanted to show off their curves like Marilyn Monroe did. Because of this obsession with Hollywood, women really began to focus on their bodies and working out to improve their muscle tone so that they could show off their long legs and fit arms. Dangerously thin. Women in the 1960s wanted to be stick thin because they wanted to look similar to the admired models of that time. This model movement inspired women to be as skinny as they could be, no longer celebrating curves like they did in the 1930s to 1950s. Skinny was now the trend. An aerobic body. Dieting and eating disorders began in the 1960s, and 2 decades later, it was an ongoing issue. In the 1980s, aerobics became a big thing, and women wore tight workout clothing that emphasized their bodies. They became obsessed with their appearances and strived for that toned look without gaining too much muscle. These small figures would squeeze into tight spandex, which was very trendy in the 80s and considered to be very sexy. Skinny is in again. Yet again, models like Kate Moss were influencing women and young girls alike in the 1990s. Even men were into withered-looking physiques, a look that some women accomplished through extreme drug use or by starving themselves. Whatever happened to the notion that bigger is better? At least the women of the Italian Renaissance believed that being curvy was a good thing. Embracing curves. After decades of women attempting to look thin, they finally began embracing curves again. In the past 10 years, we've seen curvier ladies on our magazine covers and our television screens. However, body image issues are still very real and present in today's society. This might explain the surge in popularity of plastic surgery. Thankfully, these days we have many positive body image campaigns that are helping teach young girls how to love themselves no matter what their shape.
Okay. So I think that it's a quick video that I think just shows kind of over time how this ideal image changes, and also how it comes about, right? It's not about or actually let me pause. I'll share my. Does anybody have any reactions to the video or thoughts?
There are some surprising things in there. The image of the organs shoved out of the way by the course, that was a little surprising.
Yes. Thanks, Christina. Yeah, I sort of like when I first watched it, kind of took a step back, like, oh, okay, like that. Those are the lengths that people are going to have this perfect body that I think has nothing to do with health and has nothing to do with performance. It has to do with just like how you want your body to be shaped, how you want it to look. Were there any other kind of thoughts there? Okay.
I was just thinking how fast the ideal changes. You know, in 1 decade, in 10 years, your body is supposed to go from curvy to not curvy. And so it's just, I mean, you could spend a lifetime, you know, as a woman in this country kind of chasing the different shapes that, you know, don't have anything to do with your genetics, your health, your performance, everything that you've said. You know, it's like, how do you morph yourself? I mean, you just can't. So it's just kind of a recipe for dissatisfaction, you know?
Yeah, I love how you word that, like chasing this, and it's a recipe for disaster. It's like how can you do that? How can one person's body look all those different ways kind of over time? So yeah, so it's harmful, it's detrimental to women and to men too. You know, it's similar to men. It's like, okay, you need to be bulky and your whole body needs to be pure muscle at one point. Now you need to be, you know, a thin looks in. Now it's like your chest needs to be kind of chiseled and toned, and you need to have biceps. And then it's like, okay, now your quad. So that also changes over time for men as well, and is again not always very, very unattainable, and also again not optimal for performance. Like, what do you all need as elite athletes, as Big Ten athletes? To perform well? It's not to look a certain way. It's to fuel your body to perform a certain way. So I think yeah, these social media comparisons are really harmful. I do want to talk about, because I know the question really addresses and you know, what can we do? What can I do to stop making some of these comparisons? So I want to talk about that for a minute, and I'm pulling up this slide, which is a real summary. And I'm not going to go over these points yet, but I think the first step is really like, can you notice when you're comparing yourself to others, when you're scrolling through Instagram, when you look to your teammate next to you and you're making a comparison? Can you notice what you're thinking and how you feel? We all have this inner critic that comes out, especially when we're making these social comparisons. Thoughts like, you know, okay, I'll never look that good. I need to lose weight or bulk up. My butt needs to be bigger or smaller, or my chest needs to be more chiseled. So we have these thoughts. It's never like, darn, I look good. Like, compared to that person, I'm looking great. So I think our critic comes in, and it can be negative. And I think if we can identify when that's happening and have some go-to thoughts and phrases like, yeah, I'm different than so-and-so because my body has different needs, but I'm beautiful and strong and my body can do amazing things. I know it may sound lame or inauthentic to kind of talk to yourself like that, but that's how we should be talking to ourselves about our bodies. I think if we can have gratitude and appreciate what your bodies can do. Again, elite athlete, like your bodies can do amazing, amazing things. So can you appreciate that? Like, gee, like I can run like that, or I can hit a ball like that, or I can make a tackle like that. Like that's unbelievable. So if you can kind of remind yourself of that and bring that to the table rather than, oh, my arms aren't quite where they need to be or my abs aren't toned, I think can be really important. So I have this slide up. So I know it's recorded. So when you go back to watch to get some of this information, you can have just some bullet points of some things that you can do to shift that focus on social comparison. Also, you can limit social media consumption. There's no harm in turning that phone off and putting it in a drawer and putting it away too, if you notice it's coming out a lot more. So I think I'll leave that question there. I know that was a long answer. It's a complex question, but I'll be quiet now for a moment, and maybe if Maddie or Katie has anything else to add, but otherwise we can maybe go on to the next question.
Yes.
I think, in addition to everything Keaton has outlined, I think it's so important, seeing that progression, through the past 60, 70 years. It doesn't really also highlight the added stressors and pressure that athletes feel, whether it's you're in a high risk lean sport, that has to be more socially acceptable to be aesthetically pleasing or lean. Similarly, just in terms of male sports as well. And so I think it's also important to identify this added pressure you have as athletes. Similarly with social comparisons, it's important that we really reflect upon, what we're bringing into the room, and when we're having conversations, with our peers, just in terms of how our words can impact others, or our own preoccupation with our body or food, how that can bleed through. And so I think we can have a conversation for a couple hours on each of these questions, and maybe that's time for another discussion. But, we all bring to the table different life experiences and different familial cultures and team culture and different pressures that we've had to overcome. And that all impacts us in different ways, different messages internalized overtly or covertly growing up about food and body. And so I think it's helpful to think about what's in front of us, but also how have we been shaped and what are we bringing into the room?
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. That you're absolutely correct. Really, really complex question. And I have another one for you. So the next one is how can I process the physical changes that my body goes through? This might be during a pandemic, or this might be as a result of the changes in training that happen when you come to Northwestern and start training in a different way. We also had questions about, bodies changing as a result of leaving campus for the holidays. So could you touch on just how we should be thinking about our bodies when they change physically and we notice that?
Yeah, I think this is a really great question. And it's a question that actually gets brought up a lot, in student athletes who I work with, just in terms of, coming from club careers and prep careers, and then coming to a prestigious Division I institution, a Big Ten institution. Many athletes don't necessarily realize, what they're up against, just in terms of the volume of training or the volume of fueling, that needs to occur to sustain this. And so I think having that perspective of, your body from ages 18 to 22 isn't your same body from ages 10 to 18. And so that can be a lot to digest. But I think coming from this place of patience and compassion with yourself, of recognizing your body isn't necessarily what it was, but look at what your body's capable of. And, touching upon those points that Keaton mentioned about gratitude and self-compassion, but also most importantly, patience. Embracing how resilient your body is. Your body is capable of doing amazing things, but in order for it to do amazing things, you have to fuel adequately. And I think by fueling adequately and going off, performance nutrition with resilient fueling to us also means taking care of your mental health, taking care of, building more emotional intelligence, being more mindful. Just asking, what does your body need? I think that there's different ebbs and flows during the year, whether you're in training for the off season, in season, over the summer, and that it's a normative cycle that will occur, that your body will change. And I think things to think about is, just staying in tune with what you're thinking and feeling, staying in tune with how preoccupied you might be feeling, and reach out to us. This is what we're here for, is to work with student athletes, through these things, especially once it crosses that threshold of feeling, really overwhelming. And that things are temporary. I don't know, Keaton, if you have any other things to add to this.
I just definitely would want to really reiterate like that it is normal, right? It's normal that your body changes just developmentally, and then like through different periods of your training. And yeah, you're home during a pandemic and you might be have access to different facilities, or training more, training less, and that is going to impact your body. And I think this is so hard, and to say like it's not easy, but there's a piece of it like, can we as an individual, and then as a culture on your team and here at Northwestern, can we accept that? Can we embrace that? And I think sometimes we think of, oh, my body changed, and maybe it's a number on a scale, or maybe it's kind of the way a shirt's fitting or your pants are fitting, and it's like, oh, that doesn't feel good. Like I don't like that, and we think of that negatively. And I think it can be like, oh, my body changed. Like I've been lifting a lot. Like, gee, this is paying off. And I think if we can, it sounds like just looking on the bright side, but that's true, right? Like you're working to not change your body, but change your strength or your performance. And kind of notice like, yeah, I'm a little faster, or I'm a little more explosive. And yeah, like my quads are a little bigger. And that's okay. But so I think like changing the way that you think about that, and are framing that is really important and hard to do. So the processing piece, like, please talk with us at CAPS about it. Please be talking with Katie and Performance Nutrition about those things, because it's understandable, and it's also kind of wonderful that your body can change in these cool ways. Hard to believe that, I think, but true, really true.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think that when you come in as a first-year student, I mean, the whole point is that you change. I mean, you came to Northwestern with the incredible vehicle that is your body, but to make it stronger, to make it faster, to achieve your performance goals. And so if it doesn't change, then that is kind of a problem, and so that it is really challenging. And then there the clothing piece that you mentioned, I just want to empower the people on this call to like buy a new shirt. You deserve it. No need to be running around in things that are uncomfortable. Life is too short. And so I just think that that's kind of the piece of it too, is, don't hold on to your high school jeans and try to be like wearing them. That's in the past. So just kind of, some things that we've chatted about in this office as well.
I think it's inevitable as your body's changing and you're going back into these social situations, or you're going home for the holidays or winter break, that it's important to check in with yourself. What are your boundaries just in terms of conversations if they come up about these changes, right? Or, controlling what you can control. And so I think that's also important, just from a level of self-compassion, is sometimes boundary setting, just in terms of limiting the amount, that we talk about these things too.
Great.
May I jump in there with a question? Is that okay?
Yes, please.
So I was hoping maybe that you could expand on that a little bit, because that was one of the questions that I had written down for you. When I go home to my family, they have very different lifestyles, very different habits, and they will always comment on, and like totally offhand, not intentionally, they're not trying to hurt my feelings, but they'll comment on my body being different from theirs. And I was wondering if you could talk more about establishing those boundaries with them.
I think that's a great question, Christina. And I think it's a really individualized question, right? And I think, thinking about what we all go through just in terms of our family of origin and different relationships and how we're impacted in different ways. But thinking, and reflecting within yourself when you do go home, not preparing yourself, or forecasting that these conversations would happen, but preparing yourself for these conversations in a way that, what will you tolerate? What type of language will you allow, people to talk to you in a way? I think you can have respective, assertive conversations with people just in terms of, this isn't something that I'm willing to talk about, or we all have different lifestyles and how we choose to live our life. And I find great happiness in being active and in eating this way. And I think that that's important, but also setting some limits just in terms if that's not something you want to talk about. Anything else to add?
No, I think another tough question, Christina. So thanks, maybe. No, an important one for sure. And I think like just thinking about what do I need? So like you kind of knowing what you might be walking into at home, and for people who are going to be home for the holidays, like what do I think? What am I going to need now? Do I need to? When this conversation comes up, do I need to walk away? Like it's not worth it, or is there something I want to say? And sometimes I think it maybe seems kind of ridiculous to do this, but like, can you plan for what you might want to say? Like what can you say to somebody? Can you practice what you're going to say and kind of be sort of prepared in a way? I think can be helpful when you're navigating some of these difficult conversations.
I think controlling what you can control. If routine and keeping up your routine while home is important to you, doing those things. But I agree with Keaton, thinking about what you need and how you can articulate that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the question. That's great. If anybody else has any questions as we're going through the material, definitely, feel free to pop in, or you can also put your questions in the chat. So we'll go on to another doozy of a question here. The next one is, how can I stop my negative self-talk as it relates to my body and perhaps guilt about what I just ate? It's a tough one too.
It is a tough one. And I think the way I want to start talking about this is, when it comes to mindfulness, we're teaching athletes a lot of these skills just in terms of how to broaden their awareness of what they're thinking and feeling. But at the basis of mindfulness is also the more we tell ourselves not to think and feel a certain way, the more we're going to think and feel that. And so rather than telling ourselves not to feel guilty about what we just ate or have negative self-talk, I think coming from this framework of noticing what you're thinking and feeling, being curious about what you're thinking and feeling. I'm noticing that I'm feeling guilty. What is that about? Am I feeling guilty in the sense that I just overate? Or what are the 5-6 things that happened before I overate that led to me feeling this way? And so I think the more that we can instill in individuals coming from this place of curiosity and openness, it's not just about what happens in the moment. I think in addition to this is, when it comes to negative self-talk, coming to recognize what type of negative self-talk you're having, where's that coming from, what's driving that, and similar to what Keaton has touched upon, how can you be a little bit more compassionate with yourself? How can you notice that and reframe that can be really helpful. So for example, I'm feeling really guilty that I just overate. I'm so dumb. Well, you wanted to have a cookie and it's not that you overate, you wanted to enjoy and be in the moment, and I enjoyed that and I'm going to move on. And so, I think it's coming from this place of just recognition and openness. And I think this also just comes into, where is the self-talk coming from? But also it's so multi-layered. And so what are these messages we received? Who are we surrounding ourselves with? What do we value in our life? We talk a lot about values in sports psychology. And so if I value authenticity and connection and openness and honesty, am I surrounding myself with individuals who are meeting those values, or am I behaving in a way that aligns with those values? And if I'm not, what's that about? And so I think it's thinking about what's in the moment, and all of this other stuff that's around it is really important.
I love that you mentioned self-compassion, Maddie, there. And I think that that is such a big piece. I think that almost can be like in the essence of all of what we've been talking about today. And I think when I think about self-compassion, my go-to is always like, what would you say to a friend? So when that negative self-talk, that inner critic is coming out, shouldn't have eaten that cookie, feel really guilty, oh, like now I feel bloated, and like all of this negative self-talk, can you think about like, what would I say to a friend right now? How would I treat a friend in this moment? And probably it would be pretty kind. I know a lot of student athletes here, and I know that you can be very kind to others, but when it comes to yourself, it can be quite critical. So can you use the language you might use to a friend or for a friend to support them or in that same situation, and say that to yourself, even if you don't believe it? I think in the moment, like saying it to yourself can be really helpful.
I love that.
Hi guys, I have a similar, like, related question. So how about feeling guilt around just like eating in general, feeling like you don't deserve to eat, like if you haven't trained that day or if you haven't lifted or things of that nature, saying like, oh, like I didn't hit this benchmark for what I want to do activity wise, so I don't need to fuel myself.
I can start with just
Yeah.
kind of free associating kind of what is coming to my mind there. Dr. Stevens, I think that's an awesome question, and I think that's a challenging one. I think we get that a lot where, yeah, especially maybe like an injured student athlete, too. It's like, okay, I'm not as active, and now I don't deserve or can't eat, and if I eat a cookie or a brownie, then that feels like the end of the world. And I think what we need to remember is like, I don't know how, Katie, you would know this better than I, but like we need food and calorie to survive and sustain ourselves. And we're definitely thinking about, we've been talking about like performance from a physical standpoint, but also like to study, to talk to your friends, for your brain to function cognitively the way that you need it and want it to function here at Northwestern and just in your life. Like we need food to fuel ourselves. So even when we're thinking performance, we can extend that into social and emotional and academic parts of our life. So yeah, I didn't go for a run today, or I didn't train as hard, and I'm a human being who needs food to sustain myself and to be successful and to feel okay and to be healthy. So I think again, like kind of that reframe, it's not about deserving or not deserving, but rather like I need this for myself to live. So that's one, I think, small piece that to some of that question.
And I think it's also, just coming back to this place of like recalibrating. And so, adjusting based on your training needs, where you're at with everything, using these wonderful resources that, the performance nutrition team has instilled in you, reaching out for support. I think, that's important too. And I think once in a while as humans, we're going to have those kinds of days, where we might feel that way, but it's also important just to recognize, are those days turning into a string of days, weeks, and months? And at that point, it's really important to reach out. I see we got another question, in the chat. Katie, I don't know if you want to take that from a nutrition, standpoint, but I think from a mental health or sports psychology, standpoint is, how can you trust hunger cues? I think you trust them, and I think you engage in them, and you give what your body needs, and similar to what we've been saying. I don't know if there's more to add.
Yeah, I can definitely add some more from that standpoint. So I guess, not knowing what to eat if you're not training. So I think one of the other things is, just because you're not training, just like Keaton said, what are you doing? You could be taking a final. You could be needing to go run errands. You could be needing to recover and heal. You could, maybe you're really thinking about making sure that your immune system is nice and strong these days. I mean, your body is still doing a host of other things when it's not training. And so what are the fuel that you need for that? If we're thinking about immune supporting foods, are we getting protein in all of our meals? Are we getting, vitamin C rich sources? Are we getting our zinc sources from, our lean meats? Those types of things. If we're thinking about studying, for school, are we getting our omega-3 fatty acids to, support our brain health from fish? Are we getting carbohydrates to fuel our brain to think, and those types of things? So, I would just say, continue to think about what you are doing and fuel those processes, because just because you're not training, it doesn't mean that your body is just laying on the floor, not moving, doing nothing. And for the record, even laying on the floor, not doing nothing, your brain, your body still needs energy to breathe and to maintain life. And so even if you were just doing that, you would need to eat. So I think the other piece of, trusting your hunger cues is just, observing what does hunger feel like to you? Because I think some people think hunger is like my stomach is growling. Well, everyone's stomach doesn't necessarily growl. Sometimes it's just, you start to think about food. And some people who are a little bit dysregulated in understanding their hunger think about food like all the time. And they come in and ask me, why am I thinking about food every day for 24 hours a day? And that's hunger manifesting itself. That's your body telling itself that it needs food. And so, hunger can manifest in a variety of different ways. So you might kind of observe what that is for you. It might just be, thinking, food coming to mind. It might be, fatigue. It might be a headache. It might be, you're sensing thirst, because it can come out in all those ways. But whatever it's coming out of, even if you're not sure if it really is hunger, have a little food, see how you feel. It's better than, I would say that especially if you're in a state where you're not training because you're healing from an injury or you're healing from an illness or a sickness, assume hunger, and just have a little something.
Katie, if I could add on just a little bit from a sports medicine standpoint, you mentioned that your body still needs energy, even if you're just lying flat on the floor. For an athlete, that is even more true than it is for a non-athlete, because your resting needs are elevated from all the previous work you've done in your past. The more muscle mass you have on your body, the more your baseline needs are. So somebody who is accustomed to training all the time and then stops still has heightened needs going into that down period.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would add is just, injuries too, just, keeping in mind that, crutching around takes 2.5 times more energy than walking. So think about, even if you're a scooting athlete for a time being, that's a different kind of training, but it's still training that we have to fuel. All right, my friends, let's go on to let's see, pull this up. Our last and final question so far, and then we'll see kind of what else pops up. But the last question that we had sent to us before the episode is, I think that I use food to cope with my stress around school, maybe especially during studying and finals. The question is this okay to use food to cope with stress? And if it's not okay, what should I do instead?
It's a nice, timely question, given we're in the midst of finals here. And I think the simple kind of one-word answer is yes. Maybe I'll do a couple more words, but yes, that is okay. So it is definitely okay when you're stressed about school or anything else in your life to turn to food sometimes, right? Like comfort food. It's comfort food for a reason. It's comforting, and maybe there's something that's a go-to for you that you decide to eat when you're feeling stressed. I think there's a couple of important sort of pieces to this. One is, when we've talked about this already today, maybe a lot, but the self-compassion piece and the embracing your humanity piece, that if you're stressed or feeling overwhelmed, to have some comfort food, that's okay. I think the piece that really can be damaging is then when we beat ourselves up for that, like some of that guilt that's sort of been asked about in other questions. And so if you can give yourself permission, yeah, like this is a stressful time, I want to have a piece of cake. And you know what? I kind of also want to have a piece of pizza before that. And like that, that's okay. And so can we give ourselves the grace and self-compassion to do that? I think that's a really important piece. And then I think a second piece of this is kind of getting into that coping, like is it okay? Yes, the easy answer is, but if that's something that you're doing every time you're stressed, if that's the only way that you cope with stress, that's where it might get challenging or problematic for you. As a student athlete at Northwestern, there are moments or times that you might experience a lot of stress, and that stress might be ongoing. And so if food is the only way that you know how to cope with that, then you might be turning to coping with food more than you want to be. And so I think in those moments, or just not have enough tools in the tool belt to manage all the stress that you're experiencing, because food might not work every time. So can you think, yeah, I can cope with food, and comfort food is a thing, and I'm enjoying that and I feel better. Great. Can you also add some more tools to the tool belt to learn to manage some of that stress? So really just think, is food my only coping? If it is, I need to bulk up on some of that coping, and maybe that's talking with a friend. What do you do when you're dealing with stress? That might be, making an appointment with someone here in sports psych. That might be, you could, talk to Katie. We can all talk to your athletic trainer. We can all talk to you about different ways to manage stress. I have a quick kind of a slide in here that I'm going to put up just so it can be on the record, so to speak, about some ways to manage stress. We don't have, I'm not going to go into all of these. I'm just going to, can you all see this? Yeah, right?
Yes,
Okay.
looks great.
I'm going to leave it up. Oops. I'm going to leave it up here for a moment. Things that I want to point out, like sleep, huge managing stress. It is so hard to, I don't know that I would call it a stress management skill, but something that can mitigate stress and allow us to manage stress. If you're tired and fatigued, you're not going to be managing your stress very well. Learning relaxation and mindfulness skills. You all have access to an absolutely wonderful app, the Calm app, for free for this year. So I suggest downloading it, and doing some regular meditation or breathing exercises can be really helpful. Self-care, I think we think about that like, I need to go to the salon or get a massage, but really it's like day to day. Are you taking breaks? Are you doing small things for yourself that can help you just manage those day-to-day, moment-to-moment stressors? And then just a couple more tips here, again, just more for the record, so people can revisit them if they want. But utilize support. You have so much support here as a student athlete at Northwestern, whether it be your athletic trainers, Katie in performance nutrition, CAPS, coaches, teammates too, right? Like your teammates, you have a team. Not a lot of people have a team, so use that as well, and just please ask for help. So I know we were kind of getting short on time, so that is a very quick rundown of some quick tips to manage stress, but they are here for you, and please seek help and support too. Any other go-tos for anyone to manage stress, or delicious comfort foods that we like to turn to? I'm a pizza lady myself.
I think pizza is delicious. Also, pudding every once in a while. A good, nice cup of pudding.
Nice. I like that.
Katie, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah.
Pizza, pudding, anything that could potentially give you diabetes, I'm all about it.
Nice. That's fantastic. Anyone else want to add to that question? I think about, is it okay to turn to food? To me, that feels like yes.
Yeah, I think it's all about, finding balance and finding moderation and, I think so often, especially this time in the quarter, we're all kind of running on empty. And when we're running on empty, we can forget, these things that are at our disposal to take care of ourselves. And so I think it's being mindful, throughout the quarter and just throughout our lives in general of, when are we starting to run low? How do we recalibrate? How do we refill our emotional tank, so to speak, right? I think that's important. So I think that's great, Keaton.
Yeah, I would say from the nutrition standpoint, I think it's also just really good to keep in mind, how physiology works. I think that sometimes people have a very strange idea of what happens when you eat treats and how they will immediately result in physical changes that will be irreversible and not, in the best interest of kind of what you have going on. And there's definitely room for comfort foods and treats, and there should be those in the performance diet, if that's what you call it. And I think that it's just incredibly important to find, that good relationship with them so that you can have them when you want them, not have them when you don't want them, and not make them a bigger deal than they are, because you have so many, amazing things you need to think about as a Northwestern student athlete. And so food is one of them. But we don't really want to give it, undue power, I would say, especially when it comes to, some of these treat types of foods. So. All right. Do we have any other questions that have come in from the group? Feel free to either chime in or you can put something in the chat. All right, we will see if anything comes in. But in the meantime, I just really want to thank you, Maddie and Keaton, for the knowledge that you have bestowed upon us and some really great, things that we can all think about, in these areas. I think you posed some really great questions about how to think about these topics, especially in the holidays, during a global pandemic, as we're changing our environment, getting ready for a non-traditional training season. We have a lot of stuff coming up. So I think that it's going to be great for our student athletes to go back and kind of revisit some of this information, kind of pause the video and say, that was the question that was posed. Let me think about that question for myself. I think it's going to be just really amazing. So I just want to thank you once more. I want to thank everybody that is on the call today or watching the YouTube recording. Thank you for being here. As always, if you ever have any questions or you need any help from performance nutrition or sports psychology, you're welcome to reach out to us through email or Teamworks or any available mode. So I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to add, but that is just all for me, and I can't thank you enough for being here today.
Thanks for having us, Katie. Don't ever hesitate to reach out to us. Student athletes, we're here to support you. Find us on Instagram at NU Sports Psychology. We're here to help you, and we want to watch you succeed and be with you to help you succeed. So take care.
Yep. Thanks for having us. And Maddie, I love the plug for our Instagram. So thank you for doing that. But it's been awesome to speak with you today. So thank you.
All right. Thank you all. All right. Well, everybody take care.
Everyone.